And welcome to lecture number 28 as we continue to look at Asia. Today we will look at Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand, and the Philippines. We're going to be going pretty quick to get through all of those. So much to say about each one. We just don't have time to say it. So, all right, let's take a quick look at the map. You already know a whole bunch of stuff on this map. What ocean is out here? And if you said Pacific, of course you are correct. And what ocean is over here? And if you said the Indian Ocean, you are once again correct. And what is this right here? You said the South China Sea, you got it. And then we looked at the countries in Southeast Asia, South Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of those already down. Let's take a look at the ones we're going to look at today. Let's map a little better. There we go. Ones we're going to look at today are the Philippines, right up here. We're going to look at Indonesia, which is a huge country. All of these islands, half of this island out here, which is New Guinea. We're going to look at Australia, which you already know as a continent. We'll talk a little bit about it as a country. And this island down here is Tasmania, which is part of Australia. And we'll talk briefly about New Zealand out here. Okay. Now, you look out here and you see massive amounts of islands. Okay. This is referred to by geographers as Oceania. Sometimes geographers include Oceania to include Australia and New Zealand. Sometimes they don't. We're not going to do a whole lot with Oceania. It is thousands of islands, lots of tiny little countries. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with that. But part we will take a look at just briefly is Papua New Guinea right here. Okay. Papua New Guinea is half of this large island of New Guinea and a bunch of islands out in here. Okay. So let's take a quick look at that again. We have the Philippines. We have Indonesia. We have Papua New Guinea. We have Australia and New Zealand. Okay. Let's start with the Philippines. Okay, Philippines has a very long history with the United States. Originally, it was colonized by the Spanish, and Spanish ran it for 300 years until 1898. Now, you U.S. history buffs know that 1898 is when America gets involved in imperialism. All through the 1880s, we've had the era of colonization, where European countries are grabbing islands in the Pacific, they're grabbing chunks of Asia, they're grabbing almost all of Africa. What's the United States doing in this? We are not really involved. We are not involved in grabbing chunks of the world in the 1880s. We are much too busy settling the West. That is taking up all of our energies. We've got this huge half a continent to deal with. We don't have time for the rest of the world. However, that does change in 1898. Lots of American businessmen are saying, hey, the rest of the world is colonizing. We should be colonizing. We need bases for trans-Pacific trade. We need colonies to supply natural resources, to provide markets. All the same arguments that the Europeans used. So in 1898, we managed to pick a fight with Spain. Now, the main thing that we were looking at with Spain was Cuba. The Spanish were not very nice to the Cubans, and our newspapers, through a process that's known as yellow journalism, blew up what they were doing into these horrible atrocities. We sent a battleship down there to kind of keep an eye on American interests, and it gets blown up. This is the Maine explodes, and we blame the Spanish. Most historians think it was a coal dust explosion. You get coal dust floating around, and a spark hits it and it explodes. Whatever the reason, we blamed it on the Spanish and went to war with Spain. So what did we grab? Well, we grabbed Cuba, but we didn't hang on to it. We grabbed Puerto Rico, we hung on to it, still part of the United States. And we grabbed the Philippines. Now, when we took the Philippines in 1898, the Filipinos were already fighting a revolution against Spain. And we thought, oh, right, yay. They were all excited because here comes America. They're going to save us. So our fleet sails in under Admiral Dewey and blows the Spanish fleet, the Kingdom Come. And we take over. And all the little Filipino guerrilla warriors are saying, yay, Americans have saved us. We're now free. Except it was not to be. Politicians back in Washington decided, we should probably hang on to the Philippines, because, this is close to China trade. This has got a lot of bases that would help us with trading in Asia. We should just hang on to it. And so we decided to hang on to it. Well, these Filipino guerrillas then get all upset with America, and they stop fighting Spain and start fighting America. And most Americans have never heard of the Philippine insurrection. That's what we call it. The war that we fought, several years we fought with the Filipino guerrillas, or they were finally subdued. So we held the Philippines right up until 1941, and here comes the Japanese. Japanese, World War II, they grab the Philippines, kick us out. This is where you have the Bataan Death March. And General MacArthur, American leader, as he's leaving, he says very stentoriously, "We shall return." And he does come back. In 45, 44, we take back Philippines. Well, by this time, colonization is pretty unpopular, and we gradually give up the Philippines. They become an independent country. We kind of have ups and downs with them. They currently have a leader who is kind of a nutcase. He's not a real big fan of civil liberties, and he's really down on drugs. So he basically has his police force out killing drug dealers. I can't be bothered with trials. Let's just get rid of them. So he's kind of looking a little shady there. But that's the Philippines, a whole bunch of islands, economically doing pretty well for themselves. All right, let's take a look at Indonesia. Indonesia is this huge thing right here. Let me go ahead and pull up some notes. And where are my Indonesia notes? There they are. Okay, well, you saw Indonesia on the map. This place is big. This place is honking big. This is the fourth largest population in the world. Behind who? Who's got the biggest population? Yep, China, then India, and then USA. China, 1.4 billion, India, 1.3 billion. USA, just a mere 330 million. But then we have Indonesia in fourth place with 267 million. So there are a lot of Indonesians. Interestingly enough, this is the country with the largest Muslim population. We generally tend to think of that as being in the Middle East. No, it is in fact Indonesia. Made up of islands. You saw the map, a whole bunch of islands. They estimate more than 17,000. You're going to see lots of conflicting numbers on there because it kind of depends on how you count an island and actually at what time of day you count islands. A lot of it is done with satellite photography, and at high tide, guess what? Some of those islands disappear. Okay, low tide, oh, there's the island again. So it kind of depends on you, but suffice it to say, a whole bunch of islands. Economically, they have a very large economy, seventh largest gross domestic product in the world. However, there are so many of them that the gross domestic product per capita is very low. Okay, so we don't think of it as a wealthy country. However, they have a very mixed economy. They've got a little bit of everything, okay, including a certain amount of oil. But don't think of them as, Brunei or Saudi Arabia or Iran. Okay? But they're doing pretty well. Um, Mostly tropical. They have typical tropical weather, the wet season, the dry season, lots of rain in the wet season. It is hot and humid, and a certain bit of Dutch influence. They were colonized by the Dutch at one point. Not that the Dutch ever controlled the whole thing. They had little bases scattered around. In fact, one base later becomes the country of Timor-Leste or East Timor, whichever you want to call it, which is so small we are not going to talk about it, except to mention it is the second newest country in the world. And what is the newest country? You guessed it. Yeah, that's South Sudan. All right. Actually, we may have a newest country coming up, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. All right, let's jump to Australia. Where is Australia? There it is. Let's take a look at these notes. Okay, Australia. Well, not nearly as big as Indonesia, at least population-wise. Ground-wise, yeah, it's bigger than Indonesia, but not a lot of people there. About 25 million, so very low density of population. There's a lot of dirt there and not a lot of people. Now, there were some indigenous tribes there, the Aborigines. Can't think of that name for a minute. The Aborigines live there, is what they're called, but most of them have died off. This place was settled by the British. Now, it was settled by the British as a place to send prisoners. Yeah, that's right, it was a penal colony. Before the American Revolution, they used to send those prisoners to America. But after the revolution, say, no, sorry, Britain, do something else with your prisoners. And so they started sailing them all the way around the world to Australia and dropping them off there, where they had prisons, but it wasn't a typical sit in a cell and rot sort of a prison. It was pretty much wide open. You went there and you worked as a farmer for the most part. And when your sentence was over, you became a settler. You could go get your own little farm and settle down there in Australia. Yeah, they didn't worry too much about people escaping because, where are you going to escape to? Okay. Most of Australia is very dry. Several named deserts right there. It's pretty dry and apparently getting drier. Last summer, they had these huge fires, kind of like we're having in California, only bigger in Australia. It was pretty tough on them. What brought the population in? You only get so many prisoners, but what brought the population in was the gold rush, which came right after the American California gold rush. The middle 1850s, all of a sudden they're finding gold, and it is found in the middle of the continent / country of Australia. So you had tens of thousands of miners pouring in there and had to build railroads out to the middle. Actually, they brought camels in too. Figured, hey, this place is a desert, let's bring in camels. And I understand there's supposed to be camels still running around wild out in the middle of Australia. That's what I've read. Economically, they do great. Okay, 10th highest gross domestic product per capita, doing really well. 8th largest immigrant population. Yeah, that's a good place to go if you want to immigrate someplace. 29% of the population are immigrants. Yeah, that's quite a bit. Economies, mining, manufacturing, trade, and stock raising. They do a lot of that. Interesting enough, they are trading a lot with China, and they're a little nervous about having to trade with China. Okay, but anyway, huge place, popular place to visit, and I would love to go visit there. All right, and the last one, well, not the last one. We're going to look at Papua New Guinea. Look at New Zealand. We'll just mention it in passing. Not a big population, settled by the British, just the same as Australia. However, it was not a penal colony. Very mixed economy, with tourism being very significant and becoming more significant after the creation of the Lord of the Rings movies. Because where was the Lord of the Rings filmed? You guessed it, New Zealand. And they still have all the little hobbit village they used in the films. And you can go spend the night in a hobbit home. I understand it's very pricey. My sister was in New Zealand here a couple, 3 years ago, and she said, well, yeah, I would have liked to, but I was they were on their way someplace else. We didn't really have time to spend the night, and it really was a good thing because I looked at the price tag of living in the Hobbit village for a night or two, and it was really expensive. Very dependent on trade, a lot of sheep there. Income's not as high as Australia, but I understand it's an absolutely beautiful place to live. All right, and finally, I'm going to mention Papua New Guinea. Actually, more people there than in New Zealand. However, much different population makeup. New Zealand settled by Britain, mostly white Anglo-Saxons live there. Not so in Papua New Guinea. Most of these people live outside the cities in what are known as customary communities. That is, they're kind of like little tribes living in little villages out in the countryside. This is a poor place. Okay? Most of them just subsistence agriculture. You grow what you eat and not much more. This is really rough, mountainous countryside. And so you've got all these little tribes kind of scattered up there in the jungles, up in the mountains. Anthropologists say some tribes have never been contacted by explorers. A whole bunch of different languages because they have lived separate from each other in these little jungle valleys that their own languages have developed over the generations. Not very well explored. They've been finding lots of new species in Papua New Guinea as some of the loggers move into to different territories trying to pull out lumber. And actually, as soon as they go in, those species, because they are very limited and small and in just certain areas, all of a sudden they become endangered species. A lot of mining there, particularly in a place called Bougainville, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Agriculture, you can see the stuff that they grow there, lots of cocoa and tea. We might be having a new country there. The country of Bougainville. It's one of the larger islands just off the coast of Papua New Guinea. They have not gotten along with Papua New Guinea. In fact, they had sort of a civil war for a while. Wasn't much fighting. Basically, the Papua New Guinea Navy just blockaded Bougainville and kind of starved them. But they just had a referendum about a year ago. In fact, it was December of last year. 98% of the people of Bougainville voted to be independent. And that was with 87% voter turnout. So they all want to break away from Papua New Guinea. So since then, they have been negotiating, how are we going to do this? It's not a wealthy island. However, it is potentially a wealthy island. They have a lot of really good fishing around there, the tuna, and they also have this enormous gold mine there. It's not operating right now, but they've got a lot of mineral wealth there. So we may be seeing the newest country in the world switching from South Sudan to Bougainville. Okay. All right, so there is quick and dirty, a whole bunch of new countries for you to be taking a look at. Make sure you look at them on the map, get those things memorized and in your head. Have a great day, and I will talk to you in our next lecture. Uh-oh, India and Pakistan. Ooh, North and South Korea. Have a good day.